Hello, race fans. Welcome back to the Big Brain Racing podcast, where we bring you all the news and views from the worlds of motorsport and sim racing. On this episode, we'll be looking into driving standards across sim racing in general. We're going to look at the ACC current BoP issues and how we think that could be resolved. We'll also review some recent races that our team has taken part in. Into the world of real life racing, we're going to be reviewing the F1 Hungarian Grand Prix and the Spa Grand Prix weekends, amongst a few other subjects as well. So get yourself a drink and let's get stuck in. Hello and welcome to the Big Brain Racing podcast. I'm Matt and I'm joined with Ryan and Joe. And I guess, first of all, hello. I guess first of all, major talking point this week, Max Verstappen getting disqualified from a race on iRacing.
Yeah, that's I couldn't believe it when I saw it. Like, I thought to start with when I got sent the video that it must have been someone like impersonating him trying to be, but no, genuinely him. For anyone I guess that hasn't seen it, there's a little coming together I think in the bus stop with another guy who apparently he's had a bit of beef with before. I'm not entirely sure though.
Well, I think it was La Source, originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, the source, yeah.
Yeah, in La Source it was Van Ollie Hess.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the name, but
No.
yeah. And then just goes on a vendetta to cutting across escape roads and runoffs just to catch up to punt him straight out. It's like you wouldn't expect that in the lowest tiers of iRacing, or any sim, would you? It was appalling, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not a good example to set for any racing driver, full stop, sim or real life. They're one of the fastest drivers in the world, if not probably going to be one of the greatest drivers ever. Eventually, he's taking people out because he's got a little bit of beef with them. That's just not right at all.
Yeah, I think that's the major thing, really, isn't it? It's that he's in the spotlight massively. Like if it was let's say James Baldwin or some other top sim racer that did it, I don't think, okay, it'd still be just as bad, but it wouldn't be in the spotlight as much. It wouldn't be, like you say, Max Verstappen is this big personality, this big celebrity, as well as being a racing driver, which comes with being a Formula One driver these days. And the example that he sets is what then people are going to think, oh, that's acceptable.
Yeah. He also takes his sim racing, his iRacing really seriously, doesn't he? Like, it's a massive part of who he is as a person. So to go and do that, I mean, we've all had frustrations like boil over in a race, but I don't think I've ever cut across a couple chicanes just to take one guy out for that. I know there's probably more riding on that race than some races I do, but yeah, it's just a terrible example to set.
I feel sorry for his teammates and the team, the Redline team. I mean, the amount of money and sponsorship they've probably had and the amount of time and effort they've put into practicing for that race. And because he gets a little bit annoyed, he ruins the race for everyone else, not only for him, the rest of the team. The team's now going to have bad publicity against them, and the other team that he took out that has put the same amount of effort. It's not right. It's definitely not right.
The thing is, as well, it was only it was just over an hour into a 3-hour race. So, although he lost maybe 4 or 5 seconds from the incident, and his teammate, because I think he got punted into his teammate in turn one, didn't he, in La Source, and it pushed his teammate out wide a bit further. So they maybe lost 10-15 seconds. But it's a 3-hour race. You've still got 2 hours left to make that time back.
Yeah, it was quite a big pack, wasn't it? So they're obviously quite competitive. Like they're probably, you're going to make that time up and catch up with that pack again, aren't you? So
Oh, definitely. By the whole nature of when there's a big pack, they're fighting. So even
slow,
if,
aren't you?
well, yeah, you're slower than what you would be normally because you're defending, you're attacking. So even if you drop off the back of that pack, you're going to catch it back up again. Just through even if generally in clean air you've got very similar pace, because they're all fighting for position, you're going to catch back up again.
Yeah. That incident only cost him 5 seconds, realistically. He lost a few positions. He could have got it back going. Well, he did get it back going. So, I mean, like I say, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it.
And I don't think it would have even had that much damage as well. Like it wasn't. I don't think there was any intention in that first incident. I think that Haas guy just braked a bit late.
Yeah, it didn't it looked like a pretty innocuous
Looks
accident.
like the kind of thing you see all the time in iRacing, right?
Yeah. And he's made it into a big thing. It is a talking point now. Whereas, and it's just terrible press. It could have just let it go and have a moan afterwards. Presumably it was live streamed or post race stream. I don't know, but that's your time to sort of air your grievances, not by punting them out and then making it a big media thing where everyone else is judging you. Then at that point, keep it in the race, surely. But
and I think as well, I can't remember the driver's name, but there's been plenty of people who have been in real life racing, like in the lower tiers of like Formula 2, Formula 3, who have done things in sim racing that have had real life repercussions, like they've lost their race seat or something's happened. Where I think, and this is where I don't think Red Bull do a good job of managing Max Verstappen. They just kind of let him do what he wants and get away with things that no other team would let drivers get away with. Like, can you imagine if, like, I don't know, Lando Norris. I mean, I'm wearing the hat. Lando Norris, right? He does a lot of sim racing. Can you imagine if he did what Max has done? I'd be willing to bet that the bosses at McLaren would be having words with him.
Well, Lando Norris was a victim of it when the lockdown was going on in the IndyCar race. It was Simon Pagenaud took him out of the race and it was going to win, and there was repercussions from that. The other driver you talked about, I think it was Bubba Wallace, the NASCAR driver. He actually lost a sponsorship because he didn't. I think his exact words were, "I don't care about it," or "I can't be bothered," something along those lines.
Well, I know there was the Red Bull driver, slightly different. It wasn't for his racing, but he said some racist comments, I think, while he was streaming during a sim race that lost him his race seat.
That lost him sponsorship. Yeah.
But it's just, I get it. Like all the interviews you see with Max, when they ask him like what he does to relax from racing, it is sim racing. Like he goes and does his sim racing, like it's like his whole life's set up to race. So he obviously does it because he enjoys it. And
I don't agree, but he had a sim rig put in a plane so he could be when he was
I did
flying.
see that actually. Yeah, I think that was true. But
Yeah. I hope it is, because it just shows how passionate he is, and clearly that's what the issue is here. He's too passionate, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, come on, he needs to rein that in like that.
What?
If you told me it's when he was starting in F1, 2015, say, and a bit was accused of being a bit hot-headed right on the track, and if he did something like that in a sim race, I could kind of be like I don't condone it, but I'd still understand it, not understand it, but you know what I mean. I think it fits the personality. But now he's reigned so much of that side of him in. He is almost a complete driver, right? And then he still goes and does that in a sim race. I know there's no health consequences like there would be in a real race by crashing into someone, but come on, you still can't do it, man. It's still professional sports, esports, but still.
Well, there is. Like you say, there's not necessarily an injury. I mean, sometimes if people are using some of the higher end for direct drive wheels, it can obviously. Well, people have even broken their thumbs and stuff with them before, haven't they? So I guess there are kind of some. Let's say there's no it's not life and death like real racing. Let's put it that way. But we've had people in some of our leagues that have purposely punted people off, and we've banned them for the rest of the league, banned them from any of our events for 6 months. I think as a obviously as the owner of Big Brain Racing, like for example, if one of you guys did that, I'd have to
Yeah.
seriously consider whether I wanted you in the team still. Even, you know, it is a serious thing. Even though like it is sim racing, especially the level that Max is racing at in it, because he's in all the top splits of everything. The people that are in those races have put tens, if not hundreds, of hours of practice in for some of these events.
Yeah.
To then just get punted off because they've made a small mistake that's cost you 5 seconds.
And mistakes do happen. That is racing. It's sim racing. It's real racing.
Yeah.
It's life. You know, mistakes happen. Like you just got to deal with it, and the best guys will deal with that. And you know how you can soak up that. Get beaten when you're down and still get back up. You know that was what makes some people top drivers and top sportsmen and stuff. But yeah, I was disappointed with that from him. That's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah.
It's disappointment that that's the image that people outside of sim racing see sim racing as now.
Yeah, it is, and that affects across the whole tiers. You know, you say to someone, "Been in this big race at this weekend, right?" And if they're not, like you said, if they're not involved in sim racing, the only exposure they might have had that previous week, month, whatever, is just seeing about that on a sort of a YouTube clip, a Facebook short, or something like that. It's not a good look. Yeah, and they need to make an example of him for that because he is. I think you said it, Ryan. He is setting the example, isn't he, to everyone who aspires to be him. So
the organisers of that race did disqualify him from that race, but I haven't seen anywhere that there's been any further repercussions. Like iRacing haven't come out and said that they're going to ban him for, like, because you know I've had similar done to me in iRacing, and I put a report in, and the guy got banned for 30 days. And that's because it's a first offence, because it's that serious. You know,
I mean, this leads on really quite well to just the driving standards in racing, in sim racing as a whole. Really, I mean, I know we've briefly touched on like Max Verstappen is leading that example, but it's been noticed already from my experience personally going through some racing, especially iRacing in particular. There's such a big community now, and there's such a vast amount of drivers, vast amount of experience between the drivers. It doesn't the standards and the etiquette and the patience really required for these races is just not there at the moment. ACC is a lot better in that regards because the races are a lot longer. iRacing, they are a bit shorter sprints, and they do have a lot more variety, but the standards are not good at the moment. I mean, what do you feel the same? Do you feel there needs to be some changes in that regards, or would you say?
I think for me the thing is the difference between a good move and a poorly executed move where you're taking someone out or you're causing a collision is on a knife edge. And I think a lot of people that aren't super experienced in sim racing, they see a gap and they just go for it. Where like when you have a bit more experience and you've done a bit more racing, you'll see that gap and you'll know, even though it's a split second decision, you'll know in your head that like I have to time this absolutely perfectly or I'm going to take the guy out. Can I guarantee that I'm going to time it perfectly? And most of the time you can't guarantee that you're going to time it perfectly. And okay, there's times you make mistakes, like we said earlier. Mistakes do get made in racing in general, sim racing and real world. I think generally, and I think we touched on this in the last podcast as well. Generally, I know myself and Joe tend to do a lot more league racing than anything. And I know you do some as well, Ryan. But I'd say generally league racing tends to be a better standard because there are more repercussions behind your actions in those races. So if you do take someone out, you're either getting a penalty there and then if there's live stewarding, or if it's post-race stewarding, you're then getting a penalty after the race that's either taking points off your championship or it's like your finishing position is lower down than what it was. So I think the biggest thing though is, I guess, PvP or public lobbies, whatever you want to call them. You rock up and drive kind of races, where you just can't guarantee what that quality is going to be. And I know there are some leagues that you turn up and some of the drivers aren't super good, but you learn very quickly who's got the ability to be able to drive side by side with you through multiple corners and who hasn't. And if you're coming up behind someone to overtake them and you know their ability isn't quite as good, you're a little bit more patient with them and you wait for a real clear-cut opportunity where, like, if I was racing one of you guys, for example, I know that I could go side by side with you through multiple corners. So then you're looking at it, and if it's not necessarily a 50-50, but if it's maybe like a 75% chance, you go for it. Maybe sometimes a 50, it's all very dependent on it. But you're not doing that against some of these inexperienced drivers that are going to see you come in and move on the brakes in the braking zone, or they're just going to try and take the apex of the corner, even though you're on the inside there, even if you're alongside them sometimes. And I think that's the thing with iRacing, is that you can literally just rock up and race. And okay, you lose some of your safety rating for collisions. And in the real bad cases, like the one I mentioned earlier, you can get banned for a number of days or a month or whatever, or even permanently. I think people get banned permanently sometimes. But I think generally there's no repercussion. You enter a race and you take someone out and take yourself out. You quit that race, you go into another race. There's not really no like repercussion behind it. Like I think even if iRacing, and I'm picking on iRacing a little bit maybe because it's the same with public servers in ACC as well. But if there was something where maybe if you take someone out and then you quit the server, you can't join another race for 2 hours, or I don't know how you'd really monitor it that well, but you'd have thought in the world we're living in now, where AI is as prominent as it is, there should be something that could be done.
Yeah, I think that's it. That there's just no. It is the fact that there's no consequence to some of these people. Like you said, jump from one to the next, doesn't matter. Took one guy out, doesn't matter. Just racing the next one. Like you said, I prefer leagues as well for that reason. So for me, I haven't really noticed a downfall myself in standards, but I am seeing more videos online promoting these things. So clearly it is happening. Just that, yeah, I try and I don't know. I just try and avoid. I don't like my ability to be like made up, like comprised of a number and then a tier assigned to that. I judge myself based on the people in the league. So when I rock up, who are the quickest guys, right? Who's winning every race, right? That's who I want to be, and that's how I can challenge myself and compare myself. How much closer my qualifying gap's getting, how much closer am I getting the race. That's how I do it. I know it's not for everyone because I might get maybe 2 races a week during that. Some people are doing 5 a night, aren't they, on iRacing, LFM, whatever. So yeah, I do get that side of it as well. It is not as compatible with just sort of some people's lives, which are just, I've got a spare hour, let's get on. But maybe that's part and parcel of it. If you want to enter a public lobby, that's kind of you could get anyone, and that's the beauty and the downside of it. You could get anyone on track with you. So yeah, it's a risky business, isn't it? Entering a public lobby sometimes.
I mean, yeah, iRacing obviously, especially, like you say, we're not really picking on them as such because it is probably the biggest community. It is the biggest community out there in terms of sim racing, really. And these races, you say about safety rating, but the safety rating can in turn lose your licenses to enter the races that you want to enter, the bigger races like your pure driving school experience and IMSA races and so on, purely because of a lot of the time it's nothing really to do with you. It's not your fault, but it still will register as a fault of yourself to lose your safety rating that way, whether it's a collision, whether it's an off track, anything like that. But yeah, who wants to drive around at the back just gaining safety rating? Who wants to drive around the back just to make sure they've got a clean race? No one. like you say, Joe, you want to be competing for the top, the most wins, championship runners, and you have got to take risks, but there's got to be some leniency with the other drivers to know that there is going to be quicker drivers out there, and also you are racing against other people, not just the AI, not just computer. You are racing against people that have put time and effort and a lot of energy into doing what they're needing to do.
Well, I think a lot of it is kind of lack of racecraft as well. Like, say even if you're in a 20-minute sprint race, let's say one of the leaders spins on the first lap and they drop to the back, and then they're catching you, and you're a slower driver, maybe down in 15th place. You can see a car catching you at 5 seconds a lap, or that's probably not 5, 2 seconds a lap, let's say. A car's catching you at 2 seconds a lap. Why are you then fighting like crazy with 15 minutes still to go in that race? Like, this is the problem that I have. And okay, that's probably not a great example, because okay, you might do that, you might be able to hold them behind for 15 minutes, but when you then put that into the kind of length of races that we tend to do, 6-hour races, I think I had one the other week where it was at Silverstone, and it was a 6-hour race. 40 minutes in, we were catching a guy at 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds a lap, and he fought like crazy to keep us behind. And I was racing with Luca. I was saying to him, like, I don't know why he's trying so hard to keep us behind. Like, there's no chance he's going to keep us behind for 4.5 hours from this point, or 5.5 hours, whatever it was. Like, why? Like he's just losing time at this point. And it's the same, like, even in a sprint race, the example I gave, the guy might be down in 15th, but like, by fighting the faster car coming through, that might then stop him being able to fight the guy ahead of him.
Yeah, or
You
let
know.
someone up,
Yeah.
pick your battles. And as an extension of that, a fast driver doesn't make you a good driver.
No.
There's a big difference between being a really fast driver and being able to put a ridiculously fast lap in quali, and being a good race driver. There's a massive difference there, and it is two different skills.
Yeah.
You got to know. Obviously, it's easier to make a fast driver a better driver, but sometimes speed isn't required for that. You can be a good driver. You can pick your battles. You can take the right lines and all of that kind of stuff, and just not be an idiot basically out there, and be a better driver as such.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you're not necessarily the quickest, like the three of us, for example,
Yeah.
we're not the fastest. We're not in any of the top leagues or top races or anything. But like, if you can be consistent, say you're a second off the pace of the leaders, if you can consistently be within a second of their best time, but they might be like, they do one lap that's like super fast, and then they have a couple of laps where they're a bit slower, and then they're fast again, and they're a bit erratic, and they're not great in traffic, or they're not a great driver in changeable conditions or stuff like that. Like, just by being consistent and doing your own thing, doesn't matter if they overtake you. Like, they've caught you by a second a lap, they've overtaken you. You've got the whole rest of the race now. If you carry on being consistent, there's every chance that through that consistency, you might end up beating them anyway.
If they're significantly faster, I like to, like, if someone gets past me, they're faster, they've caught me, like you said in your example, maybe they had an incident early on. Let them pass, right? I'll try and stick with them. How long can I stay with them? Because they're gaining me like free lap time, right? Basically.
Yeah.
If I'm fighting them, I'm losing it. But if they're through, letting them through, and can I stay with them 5 laps, 10 laps, however long they're pulling me along with them? That's gaining me lap time. So then when it comes to like the pit stop phases, maybe I've jumped someone in an endurance race. It's better for your overall race massively.
Oh, big time.
I try. Yeah, I mean, personally, I try and take on races where 75% getting into the position I need to be, and then the last 25% of the races, then when I will start fighting, I will start pushing a bit harder, and I will fight the cars around me to gain what I need to gain, if I'm going to gain. That is.
Yeah, I think there's plenty that could be done. It's it just takes one of these games to put something in place and show the others how to do it. because I don't think you're ever going to get all of them doing it at once. I think someone's going to do it. Someone's going to come up with something, whether it's AI, like I mentioned, or whether they have some system of recognizing that you've caused a collision, and that means that you're then banned for the next couple of hours from entering a race. So I don't know what it is, but or maybe even just a better rating system, because that's what I was going to pick up on that you mentioned earlier, Ryan, about not wanting to drive around at the back to get your safety rating back. There are people that do that in iRacing that will just potter around at the back. They'll get up to the license that they need to do the races that they want, and then they'll go full pelt and they're taking people out left, right, and centre because they don't know how to race by that point. They've just pottered around at the back to get up to the rating they want for the cars they want to drive, and then they don't actually know how to race when they get there.
It kind of undermines that system a little bit, really. The fact that you can just fudge it and get whatever number you want. Now, I could be wrong, but I think in ACC, like the built-in ratings, you got 6 numbers in the top right corner.
Yes.
I could be wrong, but I think the safety one registers when you're like near cars on track, right? So if you're poodling around at the back, not near anyone, I don't think it does anything.
I think so.
It like registers when you're side by side and like nose to tail into corners. Now, in principle, I know no one really ever bothers with those numbers in ACC, but in theory, that's quite a good system because it stops people fudging it and actually rewards you for racing well next to someone. If you're racing side by side and you're not making contact, you're nose to tail into braking zones, but you're not nudging them, you actually get a reward for that rather than just a rating where you only get penalised if you do something wrong. So that's also quite a good system, I think, if it could be implemented properly.
True. I think there are still ways to fudge that system as well. Like I know I've helped people do it in the past when one of my mates, when he first started on ACC, he wanted to do a race with me, but he didn't have a high enough safety rating, so we spent like 2 hours of him driving as fast as he could, and I was just basically following him as close as I could all the way around.
Yeah.
But so you can, but still, like it takes a little bit of racecraft to be able to do that, I guess. Like if you had 2 people at that ability, could you maybe have done it? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, any system can be manipulated. Kind of. There's no perfect system. I did like your idea of, though, if you rage quit or whatever, well, don't come back for the next one. Take a break, chill out. Yeah, that's quite a good solution, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I'll
definitely.
trademark that.
Yeah.
I got taken out. Why am I penalised? Well,
Yeah.
maybe you're headed over it. I don't know. You just don't know. Maybe
That is the fault with iRacing, especially. You're not enabling you to. It's not registering the fact that if you were taken out, you're still getting the penalty for it just as much as the person that did take you out. It's not.
Well, I actually think as well, and I know it's one of the big selling points of iRacing is the voice chat. I think that plays a massive part into a lot of these deliberate takeouts as well. Not so much like the one we discussed with Max Verstappen, but I've seen it plenty of times where someone's got a bit mouthy on voice chat, and then the other guy's just taking them out. It's like there's no need to be talking to the other drivers while you're racing. It doesn't happen in real life racing, does it?
We've not got enough to focus on at that point.
Exactly.
I have seen like an increased presence on Reddit recently saying that reports they're submitting to iRacing, they're not seeing like penalties dished out for it. I don't know if it's true or not. Like I said, I don't really race it that much myself, but the sort of the impression I'm getting at least is that it is a bit more prevalent from the user base, but it's also kind of not being actioned as proportionately by the stewards as well. I don't know if it's true, but that's kind of what I'm reading online and seeing.
You are right saying that, actually. I've put in a couple incident reports myself. There was one in particular with a touring car race I remember, and it was the guy had completely sideswiped me out at Daytona. It was just a race-ending incident. Put the report in. They said, the response back was it looked like it was a racing incident. When your car is virtually on the infield grass, swiping into the car that's on the racing line, that's not really a racing incident in my eyes. But they seem to be they are going a bit soft to me. But then maybe that's something they maybe need to be a bit more stringent with, like when they do the reports. firstly, be quicker in coming up with response, and secondly, be a lot more stringent. Give them bans, not just 30 days. Go 3 months, go 6 months if you need to. It will stop it happening.
I have seen recently as well that, like I mentioned, well, was that iRacing? No, that was LFM. Sorry, LFM do a good job, I think, with their reporting system. In that, like, when you report someone, you know the outcome. They let you know what's happened, so they'll let you know, like, oh, this guy's got two-day ban, or this guy's got a 30-day ban. Where iRacing, all I think you get back is an email saying that either what you said, where they think it's a racing incident, or they come back and just say that they've dealt with it, they've done the appropriate whatever. You don't know the outcome, so I don't how does that help you? Like, has anything come of it? Have they had a penalty? Have they had a ban? Like what? Like, what do I do next time? Like, because if you've reported something and they end up doing nothing with it, but they just say, "Oh yeah, we've dealt with it," am I going to waste my time reporting it next time, or what? Like, what's happened?
There needs to be transparency. You don't get that in real life racing, where you don't get Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton summoned to the stewards, and then they just put a notice out. We dealt with it, guys. Like, you don't get that, do you? Is what happened and why.
Well, you did get that with Ferrari and their engine a couple of years back.
All right, I take it back.
Yeah, we've signed an NDA, but trust us, it's been dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I get your point, but there's slightly different examples.
Yeah, I mean, if it was up to us, we'd fix it, but unfortunately, we're not in that kind of position yet.
I think I just feel a bit more strongly because of some of the bad luck I have. I won't say any more than that, because a lot of people have seen the videos of just some of the terrible luck I have sometimes. But that's on the up. I've had a few good races. I've got my faith back in LFM. That seems to be a lot more cleaner than what it used to be.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well, because I haven't been on LFM for over a year, and I went back on it last week with you. And I don't know if it was because I was more towards the front of the grid in all the races I did, but the quality definitely seemed to be a lot better.
Yeah, quality's got a lot stronger. I mean, it's funny you said, Joe, earlier about no one really takes notice of the numbers on the right hand side. When this time last year, my safety rating was down to 68 because of incidents I was caught up in with LFM. That was from 99 as well. It was quite a big drop. So yeah,
most of the time they sit at 99 or like high mid 90s. I don't know, for like consistency and stuff, and I don't really ever notice them. But I guess I'm also not entering leagues or daily races, whatever, where maybe that's a requirement. So maybe that's partly what comes into it. Maybe it has dropped, but it goes back up. I don't know. I just don't really ever look at it.
I think the lowest I've seen, since I got it to 99 when I first started playing the game, I think the lowest I've seen it drop is 97. And that was after a few particularly bad races where people took me out, or whatever. I don't know. So I guess the other kind of issue that we've had, little issue, I don't know what you want to call it, in ACC recently is around BoP, and particularly the McLaren 720 Evo seems to be extremely overpowered at Spa-Francorchamps in particular. I think at the minute it's the only car that can get into the 2-minute 13s.
That's really 2-minute 30. Like,
it is crazy. Even I managed to get into the 2-minute 17s the other day with a scruffy lap with no practice, which was the first time I'd ever got into the 17s around there with any car. And I know they have put out a hot fix which has adjusted some of the aero on that car, but it doesn't really seem to have had a huge effect. Yeah,
so I think it was affecting the aero, wasn't it? So you could effectively run no wings but not lose downforce, which obviously is beneficial around Spa. You've got straights, but also the middle sector where you need downforce. So that's kind of like a perfect storm for that. So I think they fixed that, but yeah, it does still seem particularly powerful. It seems very competitive everywhere. I'd say I don't I haven't found a track for it yet. But Spa especially does seem to be quite overpowered.
I can tell you one weak track for it.
Yeah, go on then.
Kailami.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't feel good at all around Kailami.
No
but
McLaren ever did though.
no.
Okay. Well, I'll just have to cross that bridge when I get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you could enter a league and get just one bad BOP track for that whole season, you'd be quite happy, I think, wouldn't you? And I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to be like it's not going to be like taking one of the old gen cars that are miles off the pace, is it? It's just
Oh
gonna be-
no. And that's the thing. I think even though it's not particularly good around Kailami, it's not massively off the pace of like the front running cars. I think you're
Yeah.
still going to be you may be 3-4, maybe 5/10 that you'd lose,
Yeah.
but again, you'd expect other tracks on a calendar across a season. You'd probably be 3-4 tenths up on other cars. So it's kind of left pocket, right pocket, as my German colleagues like to say.
I think other than that sort of the flaw that's been hot fixed and potentially it's still being maybe too powerful in some situations, the BOP I think generally is quite good at the minute. I think before that sort of flaw was realised, or I don't know if it sort of started with a previous hotfix, I don't know, but I'd say it was in quite a good place. I mean, the new cars are obviously the most popular. I think A, they're most popular, and B, they are probably some of the most competitive. But aside from the four new ones, I think,
Mhm.
like the Audi are still pretty good in most places. I've seen quite a resurgence for the Merc around quite a bit. So I'd say there are quite a lot of options. I think generally the BOP is in a really good place across a whole season, or across a variety of tracks. Now, obviously, some cars are always going to be better at one specific track. You can't tailor the BOP specifically for every track. You can't try and group them and stuff, don't you? But
Yeah.
I think across the board, it's in a pretty healthy place. Maybe aside from just that 720.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always kind of been the way with the way that Kunos have done it with ACC is that they want the newer cars to be a little bit quicker because they want people to buy the new DLC. They want people to buy the new content, and you're not going to buy content for cars that are off the pace, I guess, are you? If you see everyone winning in these cars, you're gonna think, oh, I want to drive those cars.
Yeah, definitely. It's sad that that's what business does to a sim racing community, but yeah, it does definitely feel that way. Thankfully, they're not doing them so they're 100 horsepower up, or the news came out actually about the Renault F1 engine. I think it's like 30-40 horsepower down, right? Doesn't seem like these cars are like that much further ahead, but they do seem to be pretty competitive at every track, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's the aero tends to work a little bit differently on them on the newer cars, doesn't it? So I think that's where they kind of have the advantage, but it's not such a huge advantage that, like, take the Audi for example. I know you've driven that a lot. I've driven that a lot in the past as well. If you know a car inside out, you can still compete, and you can still be just as quick as guys that are just picking up these new cars.
Oh, massively. Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so much time to be found in just knowing a car, definitely.
And I think we kind of saw that a little bit. Jumping on to, I guess, the next topic, the Big Brain Racing Endurance League race that we just ran at Indianapolis, 6 hours of Indianapolis. The top three finishers all in the Audi. Audi really strong around there. People in the newer cars kind of struggling. I think the highest finish we had in a newer car was 6th and 7th, Ferrari and Lamborghini. So obviously the BOP around there favouring the Audi. In fact, what I would say there as well, the McLaren 720 seems to fare better than the 720 Evo as well.
Yeah, I think we saw that in the race, didn't we?
Yeah.
A few people in the older one doing particularly well. The Audi always was quite strong there since it came out, actually.
Yeah.
In fact, all of the American tracks, it was quite strong at when it came out. So yeah, kind of didn't come as much of a surprise that it was competitive, but I thought the other cars might be equally as competitive. But yeah, the new Lambo especially seemed to be miles off the pace. The Ferrari seemed to struggle down the straight, which is kind of pretty critical for overtaking, isn't it? So
I
pretty
think
much the
I think compared to the Audi, when I looked, the Ferrari was about 9 kilometers down on the straight, which is huge.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like, so you're seeing at times a Ferrari in the slipstream of an Audi, and even in the slipstream was dropping back down the straight,
Yeah.
which is just crazy when you think like most tracks that Ferrari's up there as one of the fastest, if not the fastest in the straight line.
hmm Yeah, it makes you think like why were they running more wing? But then if they were, did they have to for the pretty much the rest of the lap? It's all pretty much corners, like awkward off camber or flat corners, isn't it? So did they need to pile on the downforce to get around those? So
Maybe,
yeah,
yeah,
it's sort of the weaknesses of the other cars, I think.
yeah. But good result for your team.
Yeah, so P2, Damien, our teammate, put it on pole, which was great. Had a instant, I think lap three, turn three of lap one, which put us back a bit. Did get a penalty off that, but yeah, I mean we came second, which was good. Entered the final hour. I took over the car for the final hour in the lead, and the guy behind, I think there was no maximum drive time, so he did sort of 4 hours, I think, and his teammate did 2. Could have been wrong on that, but I think that was right. So yeah, he was like by far their quicker driver. So I knew I was going to struggle. Kept him behind for I don't know how long. I think we were battling for maybe 15 minutes or something like that. Really, really good battle. Like loved it. Like our team chat just went silent because I think they knew what I had to do. I knew what I had to do, and no one needed to say anything. Like we've been talking all race, and it just went silent for that last, like the first half an hour of that last hour, just while he was gaining on me, and then we were battling. But yeah, so he did get past me, pulled a good move. I was really struggling on the brakes in the sort of final sector, especially, and he took advantage of that. Got sort of around the outside of me, which then became the inside into the sort of penultimate turn and onto the straight. Tried to fight it back into turn one around the outside, but couldn't make it stick. So yeah, really good battle though, and really fun race all round actually, and picked up a P2, which is good for our championship.
Really
so,
good,
yeah.
really good fun to commentate on that battle as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it's just a shame I couldn't keep it in first for you. But no,
they've been quick. They've been quick throughout the league all season, really, haven't they? That so Cryonics Racing, I think it was, wasn't it? The number 69 Audi.
yeah, exactly.
Probably the biggest shock. The championship leader finished, I think, down in P9 or P10 or something.
Yeah,
P9, yeah, P9.
exactly. So they dropped a load of points there. Gap at the front came right down. They're still pretty clear out front, I'd say, at least for the next few races. But a few more like P10s, and we might be gaining on them. Yeah, quite a poor result for them, but they were in the new Lambo, which, like we said, was not particularly.
Well, I think they're
strong.
still in the old Lambo, aren't they?
But you're right. Yeah.
So that's the other Cryonics Racing team, the 717.
But as like an entity, Cryonics Racing, yeah, really competitive in our league. So fighting up there with them is really good fun actually, and they're good racers as well, and they're fair racers, and I think the guy who won that, I think that's the car we collided with in lap one. So
I think so, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm sure they were a bit sore about that, but fair play to them for clawing that time back and closing us down for the win. It's good racing. So yeah, really good.
And then your team coming in with a top 10 finish as well, Ryan.
Yeah, it was good. Actually, it was a good race for us. We had a very poor qualifying. We were, I want to say P21, I believe, possibly qualifying. We were 2 or 3 away from the back. And we had a lap 1 incident as well. We were facing backwards in turn 6, I believe it was. Again, no fault of our own. That was just the incident. We just got caught up in it. But yeah, it was a good comeback race. We learned a lot with the Merc. I know we've been changing cars through the season, so we learned a lot with that car. It was quite funny because when I left my stint to take for Neil to take over, we were P13. I was only down out the way for 20 minutes, come back, and he was P10. And I was like, I didn't realise we had Ayrton Senna driving for us, to be honest with you. I couldn't work out what happened. But yeah, no, it was That was a good race, good experience with the car. We've got a good setup for Spa. We unlocked a little setup thing with the mapping as well, with the fuel usage. So it works at Spa, so we're going to carry it over and use it there. We're using, I think, at the moment, 0.9 litres less a lap than we would on map 1, and not losing any time. So we're going to see how that goes. And yeah, looking forward to the next one now.
Nice. The next race being Spa. Few weeks away, that one, so I guess we'll preview that in a later podcast. No point in doing it right now. And we've talked a lot about Spa already tonight with various other things. So I guess upcoming wise, have you what races have you guys got coming up?
So we've got some VCO qualifiers. We're racing next Thursday, I believe, Matt.
Yep.
Is that right? A week on Thursday, yeah.
We have to do some practice for that, I think, aren't we, at Zolder?
That, yeah. Do love Zolder, to be fair. Really fun track, I think. Like, it can be frustrating in the race. You get stuck behind someone, it's almost impossible to make a move. But if you can get some clean air, qualifying lap, for example, yeah, I love that track. It's really, really fun to sort of hot lap around. So I'm hoping the McLaren's pretty good there.
I think it should be now. It can take curbs.
Exactly, yeah. Get over the. I mean, the sort of the first chicane's always really tall. The sort of second one though, that's a bit flatter. You can, in most cars, sort of straight line across it.
Yeah. Just
know,
have to be careful of track limits.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's got the downforce for the twisty bits, so it should be a good car there, I think. Just avoid the sausages on the first chicane.
Yeah, definitely.
What about you, Ryan?
I've got pit skill race Saturday against Spa with racing the BMW with Steve, and we're doing the Silverstone 500 on Sunday in the Beamer as well, and again some VCO qualifiers with Dan in the McLaren at the moment. I think that's starting Tuesday next week, I believe.
I think it might be the following Tuesday, unless I've got things wrong, because I think Joe and I are in that as well. I'm not ready for that yet.
Right. You could be right. I could be thinking the following Tuesday. I've been a bit mixed up with them. And there's also a Toga series, Summer Endurance series, I'm taking part in. I'm driving a lot of the BMW recently, so I'm opening the options to that as well. But yeah, no, quite a lot of league racing coming up, getting back into it now. I think since the fiasco with iRacing and such.
Yeah, I know what you mean. My calendar's quite full at the minute with league racing. I've been fairly empty for a while, and now like I look at my calendar and it's 3, 4, 5 races a week. So yeah, I'm obviously with you, Joe, in the VCO stuff, and then next weekend I've got a 4-hour race at Watkins Glen with Luca, and also a 24-hour race the same weekend as well with Craig. So that's at Spa as well. So a lot of Spa recently and coming up. But we're in the Lambo with that, and just been working on setups and stuff at the minute. So we'll see how that goes. That's over with our friends at EOS. So
is that a Lambo for both of those, or just the Spa one?
Both of them actually, yeah.
Cool.
So at least I'm in the same car, even if it is different tracks on the same day.
Yeah, you don't want to be chopping and changing. Imagine going from like Ryan's BMW to the Lambo or something, front engine to new engine.
I have done that before.
What I'm saying is, if you want the Beamer, I know I'm quicker than you around there. If you want to set up.
So, but yeah, other than that, we also had the obviously the F1 was at Hungaroring last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of a surprising qualifying.
Yeah, it was quite a good qualifying actually. I mean, I think a lot of things came together for Hamilton to get onto pole. Like happened to be the last man. Max happened to not hook up a couple sectors, and various things. And Hamilton didn't go purple on any one of his 3 sectors, so he just happened to put the overall best lap in, rather than the potential that some of the other drivers had. But I mean, it was great to see him back on pole. Like, don't get me wrong, I was really excited with that. But I think we sort of knew he wouldn't do as well in the race. The The second half of the race was much better for the Mercs, though. Like on the lighter fuel,
Yeah.
all of that did seem to play into their hand. But at the start, they were easily third, like potentially, like in some situations, fourth quickest car, weren't they? But they slowly clawed it back to probably the second quickest car, I think, come the end of the race. But yeah, a good race. Like not the most exciting race, but a good race, I guess.
Yeah, I was away over the weekend, so I caught the start and maybe the first 2 or 3 laps, and then I think I picked it up again around lap 40. So I missed a bit in the middle, but nothing much seemed to have really changed around the time that I missed. So, but obviously good. Like I say, I really enjoyed qualifying. I thought qualifying was really, because you didn't know who was going to be on pole, and I something else that we need to touch on, I guess, is the tire thing that they tried in qualifying. I'm not quite sure that's the way to go.
No,
I know
I
they're
think
talking about doing it to reduce the number of tires that they use, but if they want to do that, they could just reduce the number of tires that they allow over the weekend and still give them free choice. I don't think it needs to be fixed like hard for practice 1 or quali 1, medium for quali 2, and then soft for quali 3. I think give the teams the choice, but if you give them the choice but with limited tires, I think you're going to get a better effect than what you had from forcing them anyway, because you're obviously going to get the slower teams are going to go straight on with the softs in quali 1 because they want to try and get into quali 2. Some of the midfield teams are going to then have to go to softs. Some might be able to do it on mediums. The faster teams maybe can do it on medium. And I think it's just, if you have less tires in general, I think you're gonna have a better effect than. Oh look, everyone's on hard tires now. Okay, now everyone's on mediums.
I like the element of qualifying. Sometimes it's like, what tires do you scrub? What tires do people use? Do they keep for the race?
Yeah.
So
Do you
I like that.
do you do 1 run or do you do 2 runs? Are you doing a run on used tires or are you using 2 sets of new tires? It's all a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I like that side of it. It did have a negative impact on practice as well, where people didn't want to go out, which isn't good for the fans.
No.
Like it's pretty counterintuitive. So they need to sort of address that situation. But I can't really see, the teams are so used to having 13 sets of dry tyres, they're not going to want to give any up because they give 6 back after practice. So they've got 7 for quali in the race. And all their run plans and all their data gathering is all built around that. Like if you start saying, well, we've got 6 for practice, we've only got 3 sessions, maybe we have 3 or 4 sets, then we'll just be in the same boat where they sit out half of practice 2 or whatever, or practice 1 because it's in the baking heat or whatever. They're not representative because they don't have enough tyres. So that creates that issue again where people don't go on track. Maybe, I'm not really sure what the solution is there other than perhaps making the tyre, well, it's probably impossible to do, but making the environmental impact of making them less impactful and transporting them. Maybe that's the place where we need to look. You see the amount of trucks, Pirelli take around the world. The amount of trucks teams take around the world. There's probably areas you can make a bigger impact, but they are less visible impacts. And I feel that what this issue they're trying to fix here is it's making it visible, making it in the forefront.
Yeah.
Whereas not the most actual impactful.
When you look, even like the calendar, like they talk about trying to we're going to stay on this continent, do all the races here, and then we're going to get, but they don't. Like no. I think I saw on the provisional schedule for next year, they come to Europe, and then they go back over to Canada, and then they come back to Europe. It's like why are you not? And I think because I think they've still got the American races are dotted through the calendar as well, and when they go out to Asia, and it just doesn't follow any kind of logical route that you would take. It's like a bit all over the place. Just because, this Grand Prix has always been traditionally at this time of year.
Yeah. Well, there's Canada. You can only have Canada at certain times of year, right? Because it would be too cold at other points. So
yeah.
So I grant a concession there, but I don't know because I'm not a meteorologist. But would 4 weeks earlier, when you're already in the middle of a flyaway part of the season, not a European part of the season, would that make more sense? Like, would it still be too cold then? Don't know. So there are a couple of considerations like that, but it's gone a full 180 from how it used to be because they didn't used to didn't want two races close back to back because they thought it would impact ticket sales and stuff. Like if people were going to like Austin, would they go down to Mexico, for example, or next week, or would they, is it better to put it 2 weeks apart and then potentially different parts of the season? But now obviously it's gone the other way where that's kind of unsustainable, isn't it, to keep adding races and keep putting them all over the place. So it's kind of got to go backwards on itself. But the trouble is there is no happy medium, because you can make a very logical calendar, but it probably wouldn't be the most profitable. When at the end of the day, they're still a business, aren't they? And that's what it comes back to most of the time, isn't it?
Exactly. They've got to make money for those American investors.
Yeah, and not to reinvest in an 11th team apparently. Maybe that's a talking point for another podcast.
Yeah, that's I think that's a podcast in itself, to be honest with you.
Big Brain Racing could be the 11th team.
Yeah,
just need sponsorship if anyone wants to sponsor us. We've already got a tyre technician.
Yeah, hang on, I've given up a driver seat for you two. Just
yeah. I don't think any of us are quick enough for that.
I'll use my 3-lap experience I had in a 10-year-old car that well.
Yeah.
I use my road racing experience. I mean, road driving experience. A week's break, and then we were straight back into the action with the Belgian Grand Prix. And now, obviously, Belgium always has a bit of weather to throw into the mix. We also had a sprint weekend. So I actually watched practice on the Friday, which was very much largely rained off. Yeah. I think I don't really like what the stewards did or what the race control did with that session, where they said, whatever happens, we're not going to count the results from practice for the grid if qualifying can't happen. I was a bit like, well, why, even if you're thinking that, why tell the teams that? Because all you're doing is stopping them from going out on track.
Yeah, I also thought that. And I also thought, like, why tell the press as well? Because then it became a big thing online and with all the commentators. And it was just really, I don't know, it just grated me. And it was really annoying. I know it's obviously a unique form of, well, there's 6 races this year, but it's a fairly unique format. It's fairly new. And obviously this kind of scenario has never happened before. And I'm sure in next year's regulations, they'll just put an amendment in where it's clarified. But yeah, I just felt it was kind of unnecessary to make a big thing about it. I just didn't think the sprint format needed that, to be honest. There's enough like sort of confusion around it, and they're trying to justify it and all that, and I just felt this sort of detracted from that a bit more as well.
Well, and I think the teams know and the drivers know well enough if the conditions are suitable for them to go out and drive. Like they don't need the FIA saying, "Oh yeah, you don't really need to go out in this session."
Especially in practice, where you want to be, you can be out on your own basically, with no one around you. So like visibility and stuff is much less of an issue.
Yeah.
When you've only got a couple of people that want to venture out, so
definitely
you can go out, tiptoe around and work it out for yourself, can't you?
Exactly. I think the nature of the sprint weekend as well, it's very much, and especially the way they've done it this year, where the qualifying on the Friday sets the grid for the Sunday. They're very much set themselves up for, if there is a bit of variability in that practice on the Friday, the teams don't want to go out and risk it anyway, because they're effectively then, if they have a big crash in practice, they've got 2-3 hours to fix the car before they then have to do qualifying. And I just, I don't, okay, we haven't really had the weather come into it in the other sprint races that we've had, but it just doesn't really do it for me. They've got that one short practice session where they're not going out and doing anything, and then they go into parc fermé regulations where they can't make any changes to the car after that. So they're almost then having to guess what setup they would need to go for and what the weather's going to do for the weekend, set the car up, and then it's fixed for the weekend. When, I mean, how many drivers didn't even go out the garage in practice?
I don't actually know an answer on that, but it wasn't a busy session, was it, at all, by any means? I'm not a big fan of the format. I think the issue for me is with the sprint weekends is, like, I actually like practice, I know a lot of people don't, especially some of the newer viewers don't. They like a bit more excitement. I understand that side, and I understand the allure of a sprint weekend is you've got a competitive session, right? Which in theory is good, but they make such a big fuss about it being it's not a race, it's not a Grand Prix. Well, I remember the first year when you couldn't call it a race, and now
Yeah.
this year it's a race. But and like sprint shootout, it's just qualifying. Like let's not be like
Yeah.
let's not. You don't need to be fancy about it. So make a big fuss about it not being a Grand Prix. It's not being this. It's not being this. You know, you're not allowed on the podium. We're not doing that. It's like, what's the point? You know, if you have to kind of justify it as its own thing, by like definition, it's kind of not working. Like if you're having to justify it, it's not logical. That's how I'm kind of seeing it, and it doesn't really work. I do like if I prefer this format to last year's format where it kind of you did effectively pre-qualifying then sprint qualifying. And like I prefer this, I think, because it is its own kind of standalone thing, but it kind of also doesn't really fit in with the weekend. Like, why not have? I don't know. I'm sure there are better ways you could do it. You could have like a sprint championship or something. But again, then you run into the issue of like someone's a champion of that, but they're not a world champion. You know, they don't have a world title.
Yeah.
Just someone, Oscar Piastri, who came second in the sprint. But he's not on the he's never had an F1 podium in a race. Do you know what I mean? So you come into all these things where it creates more issues with stats and stuff like that. So yeah, I like the idea of it, but I just feel like the execution's all wrong at the minute.
See, I think obviously if you compare it to like F2, I think if someone wins a sprint race in F2, that still counts as a race win, I think, in terms of stats, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like I don't have a problem with, like, it doesn't matter to me if you win a sprint or you win a full Grand Prix. You've still won a race in Formula One at that point. Like, it shouldn't. I don't think there should be like a definition of, oh no, well, it was because it was a sprint, that doesn't count as a Grand Prix win, and it's not this, it's not that. And again, going back to what F2 do, I quite like the way that they do it, where you have one qualifying session, but then the sprint is reverse grid for the top. I think it's top 12 now, isn't it? A reversed.
I think it's 10 in F2.
Is it top 10?
Yeah,
I thought they expanded it to 12 this year, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think F3 is more because they got.
Oh, is it? Yeah, you might be right. I think it might be F3. I'm thinking of that. Yeah. So top 10 anyway are inverted for the sprint race, and then you're still using the normal qualifying results for the Grand Prix. Like, I kind of like that idea. Like, I do quite like, because like we said from the Hungary race, you like to see people coming through the field from a bit further back. And okay, look, it hasn't necessarily been an issue for Max so far this year when he's started out of position. He's still gone on to finish either first or second. But in a sprint race, if he's starting P10, is it going to be as easy for him to get to the front?
Don't know. Yeah, I think that could be some kind of thing around that could work. You could have Friday still your practice day, practice 1 and practice 2, because I think you still need those 2 free practice sessions because you work on the car. What if one's rained off? All of those kind of things. I think you still need that time. And then you could have qualifying Saturday morning, for example, some kind of reverse sprint rate Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday the Grand Prix is normal. That kind of format could also work, perhaps. But yeah, where it works in there, we've got 1 practice session, then you straight into park fermé and stuff. That's wrong. There's kind of an argument as well. Like, could you take your car? Could you change the setup of your car for the sprint race, for example, and then have to revert it for the normal Grand Prix? Those kind of things that could make it interesting, might not. Don't know. Just kind of spitballing ideas, but it's quite prescribed at the minute, and I think it kind of doesn't work.
Well, the thing that would make that interesting is, like, say you're Aston Martin at the minute. As we said before, probably the 5th best team. If you're going into a sprint weekend and you know that the grid's going to be reversed for the sprint race, do you set the car up then more specifically for that shorter distance sprint race, knowing that you're going to probably qualify 8th to 10th and start towards the front in the sprint race? Again, it makes it more interesting because then you've got the likes of Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Hamilton that are having to come through, but they're fighting against cars now that are set up specifically for that sprint race. So it makes it harder for them to come through as well.
Yeah.
They need to do something really, because the sprint weekend as it stands now hasn't got a future. It's not going to work. They need to, like you say, come up with the idea, maybe take Formula 2's idea of classing it as an official win, reversing the grid. That there's so many elements that's wrong with it, and Joe saying it's just not working is right. It's not working, and it ain't going to have a future. It's not going to have a future. They're going to have to revert it, or if they want to make it work, implement an idea very quickly.
Or do you just go whole hog and just say we're just going to have 2 Grand Prix this weekend, practice and qualifying on a Friday, Grand Prix Saturday, Grand Prix Sunday?
Well, MotoGP have a sprint race every race now.
Yeah.
And there was a big uproar about that initially, but it seems to be working for them, and they're carrying on as they are. Yeah, different formula, different type of motor vehicle whatsoever, but yeah, they've got to do something. They really have got to do something.
How does their format work then? Do they have one qualifying session that sets it, or do they qualify for each separately?
They have a qualifying session that sets both grids,
Okay.
and then they have the sprint race is half distance of the full race,
Okay.
which is done the day before. But it works for them, and I don't believe they're classing it as official wins at the moment, but they are in talks of doing that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's quite interesting. I do like the sound of some of that. I like kind of like some of the ideas we just touched on. The downside is, do you sort of, and this is the whole issue with this sprint weekend and why they kind of try and separate it from a normal Grand Prix is, does it devalue a Grand Prix win if you win a reverse grid race? Is it artificial? Is it as organic? And that sort of question won't ever go away.
It's true, but then you think back a few years when they introduced DRS, everyone said like, "Oh, it's organic overtaking. It's not real. It's just accepted now as an overtake."
Yeah, although it's kind of like it's almost begrudgingly accepted. Though I don't think anyone's going, do you know what? I love DRS.
No.
I know that drivers or teams and rule makers, FIA, they kind of want to get rid of it. They just haven't found a solution where they can yet. And
all they've got to do is talk to Red Bull. To be fair, they've managed to get rid of it.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't know. I think if they got rid of it, teams would adapt their setup. Whereas at the minute they know they can still have, like, look at Red Bull, right? The sort of the top element on their rear wing is quite cranked, right? There's quite a lot of angle there.
Mm-hmm.
But they know because they open the DRS, they get such a huge benefit from that. If there was no DRS, I'm sure they'd take more compromises around there, wouldn't they? And other teams would as well. So you would run less drag or downforce drag, make more efficient designs. I know the cars, obviously, they always look at efficiency, but you'd have to look even more, perhaps, right? If you knew you couldn't just dump a load of downforce down the straight. So, yeah, I'd love to see it go, to be honest, but there isn't a kind of solution at the minute.
True. I do kind of agree with what you're saying there. Like, in terms of the cars were always designed around the regulations, aren't they? So, like, as soon as something gets outlawed or banned, like look at when Braun GP won the championship because they had their double diffuser. Everyone copied it, everyone implemented it, and then it got banned. So they had to work around a new set of regulations. But yet the next year the cars were still just as fast because they've worked around it. They've designed it all efficiently based on the new regulations. It's probably something like you say. And you think back to the cars that were winning the championships before we had DRS, and they designed their cars differently to the cars that knew they were going to be more towards the midfield. Cars in the midfield knew that they're going to have to overtake more. Cars at the front were like, we just need outright speed.
Yeah. You also had, and I think it goes missed, is good tyres. I think these Pirelli tyres, I don't think you can even fault Pirelli necessarily all the time. Some of the time, definitely, but not all of it, because they've built a tyre that's been prescribed to them. The FIA have said, or FOM have said, we want this kind of tyre. So they've built it. But they do, I know they've tried to make them more stronger construction, more durable, more thermal resistant, but they've not got a patch on the old Bridgestones that you could run behind a car almost all race in almost all circumstances. They had a few examples where tyre wear was unexpectedly high and stuff, but most of the time the tyres held up and you could push on them regularly. And I know they've changed it recently, so the last couple of years have been better, but generally still it's hard to follow without severely damaging your tyres. So if you got rid of DRS, you'd have to revert your tyres back to those kind of specs before, to sort of compensate for that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting point in itself as well. The tires and the fuel levels as well, because I think you always end up with that point in a race where everyone's either saving tires or trying to save fuel. Whereas I know they have a maximum amount of fuel. For me, they should have a minimum amount of fuel as well. It's like you've got to, like, the maximum I think is 110 kilograms now. If you had a minimum of say 90, it's like you've got to have between 90 and 110. Like,
Can't it too much.
yeah, because the amount of teams that, well, all of them do it. They all underfuel, don't they, massively, with the expectation that there's either going to be a safety car and they're going to save fuel, or they're just going to have to fuel save at some point in the race.
Knowing that other teams around them are also probably fuel saving.
Exactly, because I think Ted Kravitz did quite an interesting piece on it where he grabbed some bottles of water, and he was like, "This is what 15 kilograms of fuel looks like." And it's a lot of weight and it's sloshing around.
Yeah. Well, maybe to go hand in hand with my DRS removal proposal, chuck in refueling with that as well. I know there's a lot of consequences there potentially, but
I would love that.
Yeah, I think. I don't think necessarily. I know obviously refueling gets blamed for a lot of the issues of the mid 2000s, but it was not the only issue. There was lots of really great car designs on their own, but also terrible car designs for racing. That obviously takes a part of it, and things like that. So
I think what was also interesting when we had refueling as well, or the last few years of the regulations at least, you had to, the final part of qualifying, you had to have the fuel in that you were going to start the race with. And I think that was always quite interesting because even if you're like, I think at that time Ferrari had the fastest car, like, but if there was a certain race that they're like, right, we actually need to run long in this race tomorrow because of XYZ, they'd fuel it up heavier and they might not get on pole. And it's like always like an interesting balance then, and just added another little bit of intrigue into it.
Yeah, I didn't like that one actually.
Did you not?
Similarly, I didn't like when it used to be you had to start on your Q3 tire. Like I like Q, and then they moved it to Q2, didn't they? And then they got rid of it. But yeah, I like Q3 as just that pure pace, the best of the best. You've dropped all the slow teams, all the slow drivers. It's the best of the best, flat out. Who is the fastest? And you look at some of the sort of pole, like Hamilton's pole lap this year, for example, or in Hungary. Would that have been as exciting at that point? You knew that Verstappen was running with 50 kg of fuel in his car, or whatever. I don't know.
I would say if you want to really change it up, bring back refueling, but let the tyres pick what compound of tyre they run for the entire weekend instead of giving them 3 sets of running what they get given and chosen for that track. Let them have free choice. If they want to run a super soft tyre that lasts 10 laps, so be it. That's their problem.
Yeah, that goes back to the sort of tyre war days, doesn't it? When
goes back to sort of the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
But again, it was close racing. It was competitive racing that way.
Well, I think that added another element in back then because you had Bridgestone and Michelin, didn't you? Were the two that were in the sport at that time when you had the tyre wars, and you'd go to one track, and like the Michelins would just grain up within 2 laps, but the Bridgestones would be perfect, and then you'd go somewhere else and it'd be the opposite kind of thing. And the only thing I think nowadays is that they have almost too much information that they'll know, or Pirelli now will know exactly what each track's going to do to the tyres before they even turn up. So they'll know, like, well, they advise the teams at the start of the weekend, don't they? Oh, the soft tyre will be able to do 20 laps, the medium will be able to do 35, the hards will do 50, whatever it may be. But they know roughly, and usually they're not too far out either from what the tyres actually do, are they?
No, they're normally pretty good. The simulations are good. I don't know. I guess you also had that before, though, because you would have had test teams going out, not to every race, because it's not, especially street tracks, you can't do that. But you think when they had test teams, you could pound around Silverstone for 2 days, a couple of weeks before a Grand Prix, couldn't you, to know how the tyres sort of hold up.
True. If only Michelin had sent a team out to Indianapolis in whatever year it was, 99?
2005.
2005, where only 6 cars took the start. That's a different matter.
But I guess while we're on tyres then and Spa, might as well talk about obviously the wet or go a bit more into that, and obviously not running the wet tyre, and obviously what the issue there is. So I don't know. I see the tyre obviously it gets called like there's no point bringing it the extreme wet, and from a certain point of view that's true, but I don't think that's the tyres fault, because I think performance wise it's actually not a bad tyre. I think it actually potentially too good of a tyre in conjunction with the ground effects cars, and it creates the visibility problem, not the too wet of a track problem. And I think people miss that differential sometimes. They just think, oh, it's too wet, they can't run because tyres are crap, or it's too wet for the cars. And a lot of the time it's not. It's the visibility over the track being too wet, or like too wet for a car to go over it by itself, if you know what I mean.
I think that's the thing, like, and just to add to that a little bit as well, I know they've been doing some tests, haven't they, with putting like effectively mud guards over the wheels when it's wet. But I think a lot of the spray and a lot of the visibility comes from what you said. It's the ground effect, because the ground effect is naturally going to suck up the water off the track and spit it up into the air behind the car. Like, I don't think there's any way around that.
The idea of this reg of cars was, this formula was to take all the turbulent air and put it up high so that the next car coming in is underneath it. Well, in the wet, you just chuck in the water up high and it's just sort of falling back down again, isn't it? So it's a unintended consequence of that, I think. And you could fully go closed wheel if you want, but you're not going to stop the air coming out the diffuser.
Well, you see it in GT racing, don't you? You still have the visibility problems, and they're completely closed wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was watching a video. I heard that test apparently went abysmal with the mudguard test. Effectively,
I wouldn't be surprised, because nothing's been publicised about it, really, has it? So I'm not surprised that it went badly.
From what I heard, they said the water was actually getting thrown higher with them than it was without them. From what I heard, which is insane.
I mean, that actually kind of makes sense in a weird way, because I'm going to guess that the nature of having the mudguards over the wheels creates a lot more turbulent air coming of the air getting trapped between the wheel and the mudguard, then getting released and creating even more spray. Because they can't mudguard them down all the way to like almost to the ground level, can they? I think they were only like covering a very small amount of the like top surface of the tire, if I remember rightly.
It was the sort of the bottom third of the tire it was covering, but like the tire technology is so good now, and they've made the wet tires so good in terms of dispersing water. I mean, Joe, you'll probably know exactly how many liters they can disperse.
80 liters per tire, I think, like 300k or 250k or something like that. It's an insane amount of water. Like, the reason, I think there were some issues before with the extreme wet being not as performant as they wanted, and they have brought a new construction this year, I think, based off feedback from last year and stuff. And I think if somehow you could just stop that spray getting thrown in the air, right? You've defied physics, it's not in the air. That tyre would actually be perfectly serviceable on the track conditions we had for the most part over the weekend. It's just you can't have one without the other, basically.
Yeah, because I think even with standing water, it's not really a problem for those tyres, is it? Whereas that's the only thing with the intermediate. The intermediate has a huge working range, but if there's standing water, it can't disperse enough the tread depth isn't deep enough rather to disperse the water. Whereas the tread depth on those, well, they call them extreme wets for a reason, don't they? The tread depth on those is almost like a tractor tyre.
Yeah, they are impressive, like really, really good tyres. It is a shame they never get used. And that's, if you want high downforce, fast cars, that's what's going to happen. And I think that's partly why it wasn't so much of an issue, say 5, 6, 7 years ago, say pre-2017 maybe, when we had the older style cars, sort of narrower, taller rear wings, and no sort of like more simplified bodywork and stuff like that. Less downforce, smaller diffusers as well, so
the tyres were thinner as well back then.
Yeah,
True,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah,
it's
they
a
are
lot.
big fat tyres on there, especially the rear tyres now. Huge tyres.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to the actual weekend itself then for Spa, obviously we've gone off on a tangent, but I think a worthwhile tangent.
Yeah.
Obviously we had, like we said, we had qualifying on the Friday. A little bit topsy-turvy with the weather conditions, but I think probably the top of the grid was somewhat expected, let's say, especially pole position, Max Verstappen for a change.
Q3 was kind of normal service almost, wasn't it? Like, and like a sort of fairly expected order, like you said. But yeah, I thought Q1 and 2 were really, really quite exciting actually. Really good to watch actually.
Yeah, I think obviously you had Verstappen on pole, Leclerc third, Leclerc second, sorry, Perez third, Hamilton fourth. Kind of the teams you'd expect to be up there: Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren coming in there, sixth and seventh, I think. To be expected, really similar sort of order as what we've expected the last few races. Couple of people a little bit unlucky with deleted laps. I think Ricciardo had one deleted at the end of Q3 that would have got him into Q2.
Yeah, Ricciardo's was unfortunate. That would have turned his weekend around. Obviously, he ended up starting right at the back, didn't he? Where he could have been. Well, I'd like to have seen where he could have been. I don't know, but definitely on a par with Yuki, I would have thought.
And then obviously we had the we'll put a pause on normal qualifying because that obviously then set the grid for Sunday's race. We then jumped into Saturday, completely standalone sprint shootout or sprint qualifying, whatever we want to call it. And again, completely different conditions. We had it. I think it dried out in Q2 and then rained again in Q3, if I remember rightly.
Wet, didn't it? And it was Stroll, wasn't it? Who went out too early on the slicks in Q2, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which I like that gamble. It didn't pay off, obviously, and I think he stopped his teammate then setting a lap, so it was a real disaster for Aston Martin. But I like to see that. It didn't work out on this occasion, but I like to see a team roll in the dice like that. Especially maybe they were quite a big name. I'd like maybe someone else who got through, like a Williams or something. I don't know. Would have been good to see them sort of going for these ballsy strategies, knowing that if it doesn't pay off, well, we're 16th anyway, and that's kind of roughly where we expect. I guess in the wet, you've got more to gain, perhaps, though, if you're a back marker. Maybe that's why they're a bit cautious on that. But yeah, I love to see sort of gambles like that.
But I think that's always the risk as well. Like everyone knew that Q2 was going to dry up towards the end of the session. Whether it was ever going to be quite ready for slicks or not, no one's quite sure. But there are quite a few teams kind of gambled on going out late and setting a lap. And then all it takes is like Lance Stroll putting it in the wall and ending the session. And you've got straight away 3 other drivers that couldn't even put a lap in at all, and multiple others that may or may not have improved on their grid position that also then couldn't put a lap in. So always the risky take leaving it till late.
Yeah, I'm in the wet. You need to be out there, I think, because you just don't know what's going to happen. You need to have that banker lap in. And I know it's a short sprint qualifying 2, whatever segment, shorter than normal, but you've still got time for 2 runs out there. Just get out there, get a banker in.
Yeah, or just fill the car up and run the whole session. It was what I think a 10-minute session in Q2, something like that. So get out there around Spa. That's 5 laps, really, isn't it? 6 laps at a push. But yeah, then we had the Q3 shootout. Obviously, we know McLaren had probably put a little bit more wing on than others. I thought for a little while Piastri was going to get pole, and then Verstappen. Well, are we allowed to call it pole with it being sprint shootout?
You can call it what you want, but he's not ready. Wouldn't have been.
But yeah, great job from Piastri though, qualifying second. Thought he probably deserved the pole, but we know Max likes to spoil other people's parties. And the Ferraris actually look pretty good in the wet as well.
Yeah. Maybe they had. Maybe they also had a bit more wing on them, or like a bit more downforce on them, like the McLarens obviously did. Which as we may find out later on. Spoiler alert. Obviously, much better in the sort of changing conditions than the full drive, aren't they?
Definitely. So then on to the sprint race itself.
Yeah.
Nice and delayed.
Yeah. I think again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the condition. Like if they'd started it on time, it probably would have been red flagged. I think they probably could have started it on time with how the conditions were, but then it probably would have been red flagged quite quickly, just because of the spray off the cars.
Yeah, I think they did the right thing, to be fair with that. As much as it pains me to say, because I would love to see the cars racing in the wet and the drivers putting it on the line. They've done the right thing. They, like you said, they would have red flagged it straight away after a lap or two, and there'd be a further delay and might not even run the race at all. So, yeah, fair play to the FIA with that one.
See, I kind of have mixed feelings about it because I want to see. Look, I don't want to see anyone get hurt, obviously, or worse. But racing is inherently dangerous. Like I think I actually think the FIA were probably a little bit too hesitant all weekend this weekend with everything. Like even when the sprint finally got underway, they said, "Oh, it's going to be behind the safety car," and it was behind it for 5 laps, I think, in the end. And it looked ready to go pretty much as soon as they'd done a lap.
Yeah, I was surprised. I wasn't surprised it didn't come in at the end of lap one because where they generally go around a second time, don't they? But I thought looking at it, it would come in at the end of the second lap. I mean, we're not the ones sat in the car, but it didn't look to change much between the end of lap 2 and the end of lap 4 or 5 or whatever it is when we actually got going. So yeah, I thought they could have potentially got underway a couple laps sooner in that, which would have been nice, considering it's quite a short race anyway, or short sprint or whatever. So yeah, I thought perhaps maybe they're a bit too cautious there, but like you said, perhaps understandable at Spa. If it was, say, it was Silverstone, and the few deaths that happened at Spa, if it was somewhere else and they hadn't happened at that track, would they have potentially been slightly less cautious? Don't know, but I can't help but think that it'd weigh on their mind, and
Right.
potentially, who are we to say? But
Yeah,
it looked like the conditions didn't really change much between the first couple laps behind the safety car and the last one behind the safety car.
but it just made it. It then made it. I guess it made it a bit more of a spectacle because of what we were saying earlier about the tires. Like as soon as the safety car went in, everyone wanted off those wet tires because the track was too dry, and it's just like, how do you? Like you've got a rule in place that if the race starts behind the safety car, you have to be on the extreme wets. So, but then they don't want to race on the extreme wets because the track's too dry by the time the safety car's gone in.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a paradox for me. It's like you need to either have an extreme wet tire that works, has maybe a bit more of a range.
they're
Maybe
talking about an Inter Plus or something. I think that, I mean, I don't think it would actually be called that. I think it would just be called a wet and just take the place of it. But sort of is an Inter, but with a bit more of, can go into a little bit more standing water because if it gets too wet, they're not going to race anyway. So what's the point? That's a potentially good idea. Doesn't really, and it does to an extent solve some of the visibility issue because by the nature of it, it kicks up less water, but obviously it doesn't affect the underfloor of the car and all the water that kicks up. So yeah, that's good. And the rule itself, where if you're behind a safety car and you've got to be on extremes, makes perfect sense. It's just that the way the cars are, the way the tires are, the way the nature of modern motorsport is, it's kind of conflicting, isn't it? That's the issue. The rule itself does make sense. If it's too wet, then you shouldn't be on a light wet tire, right? But
yeah,
it doesn't work in modern practices at all. So I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. Hopefully, bring in a slightly better tire that gives them a slightly more working range, and that would help some of the issues at least.
yeah. But then it did. I guess it did make it for a bit of a spectacle because I guess if the sprint race had just been dry, you wouldn't have had any pit stops. So that did add some interest to it because as soon as that safety car came in, you had at least half the field wanted to pit straight away. It did seem like no team was really interested in stacking in the pits Obviously,
Yeah.
quite a condensed pit lane, I think, in Spa. So I think obviously Pierre Gasly did very well out of it, pitting on that initial lap. I think as well, because of the position of their garage compared to some others, they could get the car in and straight out instead of having to wait for others to drive past.
Yeah.
Obviously,
You're right.
same with Piastri as well in the McLaren. Got him in and pitted and out, and actually jumped Max at the pit stop, didn't he?
Yeah, that was really good to see. I think we all knew the inevitable was coming, but like it was good to see, and like his rookie, yeah, it was great to see him up there. Like that was really really fantastic. It sort of gave the sprint race something. Like I know we just sort of sat there for 20 minutes earlier saying how much we didn't like the format, but at least it gave us something at least.
Well, it's look at the end of the day, we like racing, right?
Yeah.
So if it's going to give us some good racing, then great. But yeah, I think obviously then the rest of the field all pitted the following lap. I from that point onwards, I always thought it was kind of inevitable that Verstappen was going to catch Piastri, especially with that higher wing level that the McLaren was running. It was always going to happen that Max was going to just breeze past him on the straight when he got the chance. I think obviously the safety car, was it safety car or VSC? I think it was full safety car when Alonso binned it, right?
No, it was VSC, I think, wasn't it?
Was it just VSC? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
But anyway, I think obviously Max benefited. No, I think it was full safety car because Max overtook him then straight down the Kemmel Straight. Because I think Piastri arguably jumped a bit too early on the run down to the bus stop chicane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Right,
and then Max got him down the Kemmel Straight. I guess the other major talking point from the sprint race was the Lewis Hamilton move on Sergio Perez.
Yeah,
I know what my thoughts are on that, but what do you guys think?
I think it was. Well, I'm really conflicted, right? Because I think they had to give him a penalty, but I also think I probably wouldn't have. And I think they had to based on the wording of the regulations, and so they look at it as wholly or predominantly to blame. Now, he was alongside Perez at one point, even I think potentially or partly in front. So he's got every right to be there. He's not dived in from 10 car or 5 car lengths back or whatever. He's like legit there. But they collided in the middle of the corner. Now, Hamilton obviously got a little bit of understeer on the curb in the wet. Would Perez have made the corner around the outside if Hamilton wasn't there? Absolutely. Would Hamilton have made the corner? Yeah, absolutely. But he did go into Perez, so I think you do put more of the blame on him than Perez. I don't think you can put any on Perez, to be honest. I think it has to all go to Hamilton, but with a lot of mitigating circumstances because of the conditions and because of that, I think wholly or predominantly to blame. I think you have to say he is predominantly to blame. So there you go. It's a slam dunk penalty in the FIA's eyes. But I think that's it. I probably wouldn't have penalised it myself, but I just think for consistency, I think they had to. So I think, yeah, disappointing. I don't think I would have penalised that. I think he was there legitimately, absolutely every right to be there.
But here's the thing, though: if it had been wheel to wheel and no damage, do you think they would have still penalised?
No, and that's an issue because you shouldn't look at the consequence.
Exactly.
So we'll never get an answer on that. But yeah, I suspect that at all. And you can't say that caused him to retire. Well, he did do a couple more laps. Could they have, like, you can't say, you can't look at it and go, we penalised him 5 seconds because he retired. Like you said, you're looking at the consequence at that point. You have to just look at the action, which was side on side. The move was on. He was fully in control of the car. So yeah, I think I wouldn't have penalised that myself, but I understand why I think they had to.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Racing incident.
Yeah,
That's what I think personally.
I think you compare that to like GT racing.
Yeah.
Like if you're not banging doors with someone in GT racing, you're leaving them too much space, right? And I know this isn't GT racing, and I know they have their own sets of rules and regulations, but I can remember plenty of other incidents where we've had similar contact in F1 and it's not been a penalty.
Yeah. And that's the issue. I just sort of went on about consistency. There's still massive inconsistency with penalties that gets dished out. And I think actually Gunter Steiner talked about it earlier in the year, and I think he was kind of spot on when he was saying, the stewards are changing every week, and that was brought in for a reason, to mean there's impartial and all of that kind of thing. You can't have one steward with a vendetta against someone else. I'm not saying that anyone in a professional line of work would do that, but it was for those kind of reasons, right? But we've created another reason now where people's interpretations of rules can be different week on week on week on week. And I know they're supposed to look at previous examples and, follow the precedent or set one, perhaps. But maybe you need a core of stewards that remain consistent throughout, but then add in, the local clerk of the course each week. So maybe 1 or 2 change, but 2 or 3 stay consistent. And then you have that continuity, I think. And I think Gunter was sort of on about that earlier this year when Haas were getting some penalties, and I think he's absolutely right on that, to be honest.
I think Haas is probably fair enough. If you look at, I remember that it was when they had wing damage and they got flagged to come into the pits to repair it, but then other people in the next race or two had the same damage and didn't get flagged to come in.
Yeah. Do they still follow the rule where there's a driver in with the stewards every weekend? They do. I mean, yeah. So I mean, like, the steward consistency, I agree with you, Joe. There should be, I think, consistent stewards, or maybe even the same stewards week in, week out, and then maybe, like you say, clerk of the course, maybe just do the driver, a different driver every race to give their opinion, their point of view from a racing position. But yeah, there's way too many inconsistencies with the penalties, way too many.
Which is a shame because we are the most elite sport in the world, possibly the most heavy regulated sport in the world, and we can't get penalties dished out correctly.
Then I guess you look at other sports and you have the same issues. Even look at football, right? You brought in VAR, and all that's done is change the controversy. It's not got rid of it; it's just changed it. So maybe, like say, if they had a core of stewards that are all the same every race, I guess you're still going to have. And a lot of it, I think, is the media as well. The media want to find a story out of something. So, if you've got a core of stewards, and let's say, for argument's sake, Lando Norris gets penalised particularly heavily all the time, there's then a media story all of a sudden that this group of stewards have got a vendetta against Lando Norris.
Yeah. So they are kind of in an impossible situation, but you can't win. Yeah, and things will always. You still see it with VAR. Things will always slip through, and they will get something wrong occasionally. But if it is just occasionally, you kind of no one wants it, no one wants to see it, but you can understand people are human. People do make mistakes.
No one wants to see a championship decided from a wrong decision, right?
Not before me. So, but I don't think it was a penalty, but I see why they penalised it. Unfortunately, I think it was a good move, and I want to see that kind of racing, especially in a sprint race. This is how they bill a sprint race, right? It's frenetic for 10 laps or whatever. Well, don't bill up that and then take it away.
Yeah, like you say, if you have to apportion blame one way or another, it obviously does go to Lewis, but you then got to look from Perez's side. Like, could he have perhaps given some more room, knowing that he knows Lewis is there on the inside, he knows it's wet, and it's likely that he's going to get understeer there.
Yeah,
it's
definitely
not putting any blame on Perez, but for the sake of his race, he should have looked at that and gone, well, I might be better scoring 1 less point, but still being in the race than risking it. I don't know. It's hard to say in that instance, isn't it?
Definitely. He's lucky that it wasn't last year's format where he would have been out of. He'd have been starting from the back of the grid for the race then at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do think the sprint racing has arguably been better this year because it doesn't then set the grid for the main race. Like you could tell last season in some of the sprint races that drivers didn't want to go for it because they're more worried about their grid position for the Sunday. Because obviously that's where the big points come. Especially last year, there was only points for first, second, and third in the sprint, weren't there? So, like, if you're fighting over 12th and 13th,
what's the point?
Yeah, I'll start 13th, knowing that a definite 13th over a potentially 12th.
You'd
Yeah.
put it off. Yeah. Yeah, so it is a better format for sure, but it's not a good format.
No, it still needs some work, I think.
Yeah.
But now, if we remember back to what happened in Friday qualifying, we can then talk about the race on Sunday.
What's going on this weekend, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's difficult. It was honestly like I think the format is better than last year, but I think for your casual viewer, obviously for us, we've all followed F1 for a long time. Even I think for me, it was quite difficult to keep track of where everything was at each certain point in the weekend. You get to the race and you're then having to think back to what's happened on Friday and who's on pole, and
qualifying's mixed up, and
yeah,
like you also had the issue of it qualifying being Friday night, and can I get out of work quick enough and all of that, like to see that, which is I was working from home, so that actually was an issue, but for a lot of people I think that could be an issue. So,
It was sort of, but I just turned it on at work and said, "Sod ya." So
yeah.
I just said, "Oh, it's Alpine are involved. I've got to watch it. They told us to." So yeah.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know this already, Ryan works for Alpine. Yeah, I think I thought the race on Sunday was okay. It was okay. There wasn't. I can't even think of too many talking points from the race, to be honest. Obviously, you had Max starting down in 6th because of his penalty. But I think I saw in the build up to the race. I don't normally watch the build up, so I was lucky that I caught it. Martin Brundle did a fan walk instead of a grid walk, and he was talking to a Red Bull fan and asking this guy like what he thought was going to happen in the race. He said, "Oh, Max will be in the lead by lap 3." And I thought to myself, like, I hate the fact that he's probably right.
Yeah.
And it didn't take too much longer. I think it was lap 7 or 8. Max was in the lead.
It wasn't as quick as I thought it might be, but yeah, it was. Yeah. What else did we expect? I sat down before and we were talking here, and I was like 1 lap easily. I thought maybe 6, but yeah, it was with the potential for it to be more if cars in front of him had an issue in turn 1 or anything like that. So yeah, which did happen.
Yeah, which did happen, which helped him out quite a bit, didn't it?
Exactly. But yeah, Max was just inevitable, like we said before, inevitable, isn't it? That car, that long straight, that driver, then nothing else was going to happen, was it? The only thing that can stop him is reliability, I think, at this point. I don't think he's going to make a mistake. Don't see it happening. Could he get caught out by a safety car or something like that? Yeah. Could he get caught out by a back marker or some debris? Yeah. But other than that, I don't see him. How can he lose? He's that good and in that good of a car.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost. I saw something a while back, and they were saying they should just give Max the title now, give him the rest of the season off, and and put Ricciardo in that car and just see how he does.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously we were kind of touched on it there. The little incident at the start between Sainz and Piastri. I think I saw an interview with Sainz after the race, and he wasn't too happy about Piastri, but I kind of put all the blame on Sainz for that one. He was looking for a move on Hamilton, locked up and dived to the inside. Piastri was already there. Like I don't know where he expected him to go. He's not just going to vanish from the apex of the corner.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. For me, wholly Sainz again. Sort of going back to the Lewis one. Would a more experienced driver has put his car on the inside? Maybe not. There's potentially an element of Sainz's argument there, but he had absolutely every right to have his car there. It wasn't like he even dived at the inside. He was just alongside and took his line. He was legitimately there. So for me, all Sainz. Yeah, I don't see how it could be anything else, to be honest.
No, and I think, like I say, for me, that it's not necessarily that Piastri either should or shouldn't have been there, because I think he should. For me, it's the fact that I think Sainz just got completely out of shape. Personally, I think he was focusing entirely on what Hamilton was doing. Hamilton braked maybe a little bit earlier than what I was expecting, taking it a little bit easier into turn one, which here's
Again,
something for you. Here's something for you, Sainz. It's a Grand Prix. It's 44 laps. Do you need to dive up the inside of Lewis into turn one? And then he's snatched a break and he's just had nowhere else to go.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I saw it. Shame for Oscar because he's obviously had a mega weekend. So
Shame for both of them, really, because I think from where they were on the grid, they could have both had a decent race. Obviously, the Ferrari pace with Leclerc was pretty decent all race. Not Red Bull decent, but quick enough that he kept Lewis behind the whole race.
Yeah. It was good. Again, like you said, sort of not where they needed to be, but yeah, it was good pace. It was. Norris we sort of touched on earlier as well. He actually had a really good stint. The sort of second half of the race was actually really, really strong from him. But it was sort of undone pretty much by having that high wing and high drag and the wrong sort of combo for that circuit.
Well, I think I saw somewhere as well. They said that he had a steering issue in the first part of the race, which affected him quite a bit as well. And that's why I think they had a little bit of team radio where they were trying to like advise him of things to do to kind of sort it out. And I think that's what that was to do with. So I think a combination of probably the high wing or high downforce levels and that steering issue. I mean, I think for me, still a good result to come home in 7th, considering a lot of the first half of the race, you looked at it and he was just right down the back of the grid.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, definitely. Ahead of most of their nearest rivals, I think, like kind of Alpine and ahead of one Aston Martin and stuff like that. So, yeah, not a bad result, all things considered. And like really good second half of the race pace. If they take that same package to Monza, though, they'll struggle again. But it does mean that they should do quite well at Zandvoort, Singapore, Suzuka, places like that, perhaps.
Yeah.
No. So I'm just going to throw it out there quickly. Do you reckon McLaren can win a race this season with that package at those shorter tracks, or you still think Max is?
They're good, absolutely, but something's got to go wrong for Max not to win. And then if something does go wrong, he's going to be in a strong fight with Mercedes, potentially Ferrari, who knows, potentially Aston Martin if they can get back to where they were at the start of the year. For me, it's a no, but yeah, I'd love to see it, absolutely, but I just don't see it happening.
I think Zandvoort's maybe a good track for it.
Well, they do like the colour orange in Zandvoort.
They do, yeah.
Beating him in Verstappen's backyard might actually break Verstappen for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the championship challenge comes undone, right?
Yeah. the thing that I found interesting with Verstappen though this weekend, like, I think he's at that point now where he knows that this championship is pretty much wrapped up. He knows that he's got the best car. He doesn't take some of the risks that he took earlier in his career, or even earlier this season necessarily. Like you think back to when he was coming up to pass Lewis Hamilton. The old Max would have gone for the move at the end of the Kemmel Straight a lap earlier, whereas Max now with a bit more of a sensible head has gone, well, I'm going to get him next lap. Mm-hmm. So I'll just slot him behind, follow him around, and there we go. We've got him the next lap. Yeah,
definitely. And he knows that. I don't even know if it's a championship head or just I've got the best car head. He knows he can pass anyone on that field without, give him DRS and the right tyres. He can pass anybody. There's nobody who's going to stop him. I can't.
Even Perez in the same car.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you don't ever think, like, I think when he got past Charles Leclerc, I think the gap was 6, 7, 8 seconds to Perez, and you already thought, yeah, Max is going to win this race.
And Perez won't fight him. He won't fight him. He wants that seat too much for next year to fight him and then get caught up in some kind of incident or slow them both down or whatever. He's not going to fight him. He'll just roll over and let him pass. And if Max is out of the race, he'll hopefully pick up the win. But if Max is in the race, Max is always going to beat him, right? Unless there's any other kind of issue.
Well, I guess we did see earlier in the season, a couple of races, Perez arguably outperformed Verstappen, but I think very kind of track specific.
Track specific, but also his demeanour has changed massively from those opening couple races.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it? Different mindset completely, I think.
He's always been on a recovery drive the last 5 or 6 races, really. Although, to be fair, he did qualify well for this race this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did. Maybe did he? Maybe he should have been inherited pole. But yeah, no, still front row and good. Yeah.
I'll go back to what I said about the Hungary race, though. I think the updates that they brought for that Red Bull don't necessarily show as much in qualifying pace as what they do in race pace. I think the updates seem to work a lot better in race pace than what they do in qualifying. So, whereas some of the others have brought updates that have maybe helped them out in qualifying, the Red Bull updates are definitely. Oh, look, you had Max was 22 seconds ahead of Perez at the end, who was then 32 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc.
It's crazy gaps, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, that's overall. So yeah, Charles Leclerc was 32 back from Max, not 32 back from Perez. And then obviously Hamilton pitted to get the fastest lap at the end, so he was a bit further back than perhaps where he would have been. But still, the gaps are they're just crazy.
Yeah, 30 seconds over the next car, basically.
22 seconds over your teammate, who you were multiple seconds behind.
Yeah, it's true. Unstoppable.
And there was I did say it on the team radio when Max got ahead of Perez. He was saying, like, he was joking with his engineer because he was saying, like, oh, his engineer was like saying, like, oh, you need to be a bit careful on these tires, you've got to get them to the end. And Max said, like, oh, well, I could just build a gap if you want, and then we could pit and you could have some pit practice.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of like part joking but also part not, because he did build enough gap that they could have pitted him again at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Which was like really ballsy last time they did that. And again, I love to see that, but so high risk. Like, I'm surprised they did it, but that's Red Bull in a nutshell, isn't it? Like, I do love to see that.
It's the arrogance that's brilliant at the moment. Like the fact he's actually saying things like that, the rest of the teams are hearing him going, "Wow!" Like, has he actually said that? The arrogance is unbelievable. But if you're the best car, the best driver, what do you expect?
Yeah, without a challenge, basically, because Perez isn't challenging him as much as he says he is and how much he wants to. He's not in the race for this championship at all.
Well, and Red Bull don't want him to be realistically either, do they?
No, this was a perfect result for Red Bull 1-2. So that's all Perez needs to do is just pick up those seconds.
And it's the right one too for them as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I did see that they managed to break the trophy again. Constructors' trophy this time, though.
Well, maybe they've run out of room in the cabinet, haven't they? They can't afford to put them in. So
Exactly, they've got enough in there. I guess the other interesting news that came out of the weekend, obviously Alpine deciding to sack Otmar Safnauer and Alan Permain, announcing it at the start of the weekend, and then saying, yeah, they're carrying on this weekend though, but yeah, we've sacked them effectively. Bit of an odd decision for me, like, especially when you look, and Alpine actually in the race itself had a pretty decent result. You had Ocon in 8th and Perez in 11th. Like, decent result for them considering what they've had the last few weeks or the last few races. But yeah, to come out and say on the Friday, I think it was, yeah, we're parting ways.
Odd timing, right?
Yeah, like why would you do that at the start of a weekend? Like, even if you've told them, why would you announce it publicly?
That's the thing, is the whole media circus is there, right? Why not do it the Monday after the Grand Prix?
Yeah.
Like that. But yeah, I don't know. Ryan, you're obviously, I'm keen for your take on it.
I've got to be careful what I say, really. No, no. To be honest with you, them doing that, like you say, publicly is a bit of an odd one, especially to the two high-profile figures that they have done it with. I mean, Alan Permain's been there since the Benetton days, and I don't think he's really put a foot wrong. You want me honestly, I think Alpine are growing impatient. This 100 race plan that he had, which was back in 2021, started. We're on race 52 now off that plan. We're only halfway through. They've not taken into account other teams progressing just as quick, if not quicker than them. It's almost a bit like a football club mentality, and I don't agree with it. It should have given Otmar Safner a bit more time. Maybe change the roles about, maybe move Alan Permain back into what he used to do with the engineering side of it. Hire some new figures to help. There's so much they could have done, but the impatience, I think, will show in the long run because the results are not going to come in because of that.
It already has, though, because they've been through, 7, I think it is, team principals now in, I don't know how many years, but the relatively recent history across Alpine, Renault, etc. before.
Yes, since 2015, I think that is, I believe.
It's kind of like a revolving door there, right? And this 100 race plan, it was a 5-year plan 8-9 years ago with Renault, Lotus Renault, etc. It's just restarting that all the time, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, in 50, 40, whatever more races you said they got left on this 100 race plan, if they're right at the front, then Formula One's better for that, definitely. But they just seem to be going around in circles and just firing people and replacing them, and then, oh look, that didn't work out as well, let's just fire them and replace them again. That kind of, you need that consistency, right? And you need to allow time for that 100 race plan if that's what you said you're going to give, right? So it's hard for me. And obviously the Laurent Rossi CEO moved off a little while back as well, didn't he? Like less than a month ago or something, a couple of weeks ago. And he obviously I don't think it was ever announced, but he obviously was quite scathing of the team, like after the Miami performance, wasn't he? And I don't know if that was directed at like Otmar Safner or people like that are running it, maybe. I don't think that would ever come out, like that would ever get like cleared up what it was, who it was about, if anyone. But then he kind of left, and maybe I thought, oh, they'll be all right now. But yeah, they're clearly gone as well, right?
It's not. I mean, Adam Prost was a special advisor to him as well, and they got shot of him, which he come out with a comment the other day saying that it was flawed. Cyril Beatball, who now works for Hyundai WRC, saying the plan was flawed. They shouldn't have got rid of Otmar Safner and Permain. They should have given them time, given them the resources to do it. A bit of chaos at Alpine at the minute.
The trouble, I think the problem is they've not been French enough. They've not had any strikes yet.
Need a riot protest.
But no, I think for me, it's like why do you tell someone or publicly tell everyone this person's lost their job? But they've not lost it just yet. They're going to be losing it in like 3 days' time.
Gardening leave. It's like they're still working for us for 3 more days.
There's a heavy rumour going around at the moment that Otmar's going back to Aston Martin. I don't know if you have heard that at all, but apparently he spent a lot of time with them over the Spa weekend.
Okay. I could believe that, but I think as part of his contract, he has to be on gardening leave for 12 months first, doesn't he? So
something along those lines, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was announced as some kind of capacity role within Aston Martin again for the near future.
Yeah. I mean, 12 months garden leave would be great, right?
Yeah. Everyone, wouldn't it?
Full pay as well when you're on gardening leave.
Oh, imagine that.
Imagine how good at sim racing we'd all get. What are you doing today? I'm working. That looks like your sim racing. That is my work for the next 12 months. 8 hours a day, every day. So I guess that kind of wraps up the Spa weekend in a nice little bundle. And probably just about wraps up the podcast. But as is our usual thing, I think Ryan, have you've got a quick question for us at the end here?
Well, the first one is most pole positions without a win in a single season. Who holds that record?
Ooh.
I've got to admit, I was shocked when I saw it as well.
I mean, Charles Leclerc's had a few this year, but I don't think that's going to be a high enough number, right?
Nah, the number is 7.
Jesus.
7 poles without a win.
What about someone like Montoya.
Oh, well done, Montoya.
Oh, that's a good guess.
Correct answer. 2002.
Yes.
Nice,
7 wins, 7 poles without a win. That's it's going some.
You ain't on that website, are
No,
you? And the second one is most retirements in a title-winning season. Who holds that record?
As in the most retirements, and then they still won the title.
Yes, correct.
I mean, it's got to be probably pre-2000 because the reliability's been too good since then. Unless it's retirements through accidents and crashes.
You get more races now, don't you?
True, yeah.
So that. Most retirements in the title winning season. What's been particularly close?
Could it be Kimi Räikkönen?
No, he's not on the list at all. Looking at this,
Because I know he only won by a single point, didn't he?
Oh, sorry, yeah, he's on the list. Only 2 retirements in
Okay.
2007.
Okay. I know he only won by 1 point that season, so I know it's obviously close.
Yeah.
I know Lewis Hamilton had a few in 2008 when he won it.
Yeah, stumping. Don't even know whether to go old or new. That's the trouble. Or like not new, but
Lewis Hamilton only had in 2008 1 retirement.
Oh, really? That was China, right?
That was
Because he put it in the gravel on pit entry.
no, that was 2007, wasn't it? That one.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
2008.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking
when
of
did he
that.
retire? That's a stat. That's a question for another day. I'll give you a. Well, shall I give you a clue? Do you want a clue?
just a little clue.
The number of DNFs is 6.
6.
I think I will be shocked if you get it.
Yeah, I don't.
What sort of era are we looking? Pre 2000 or post 2000?
Pre 2000.
Okay, so I was right with my initial.
Yeah.
What about Keke Rosberg or someone like that?
It's a good guess, but no, he only had 3 retirements in his championship year.
I think you might have stumped us.
I think I've got you.
I think. Shall we open this one up to the comment section and you can give us the answer next time?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
I think we're stumped, but no cheating.
Well, I'll tell you something. Drivers 2nd to 9th all had 5 retirements, but there's only one driver in particular. There's only one that stands out that had the 6.
Let's open it up.
Yeah.
we'll get the answer next time. So I think that kind of wraps things up for this episode. So thank you very much for watching / listening. Also, if you're interested in joining a sim racing team, we're always looking for new talent. You can find all that information on our Discord, Instagram, all the usual places. But yeah, thanks for joining us this time, and we'll see you next time.